Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 20 of the InkPod Podcast. Today, we are here with Marty, who's the North American Sales Director of Chromaline, and Amy, who is the Senior R&D Chemist. Thank you very much, guys, for joining today.
You're welcome.
So we're going to do a bit of a different approach. It was Marty's recommendation not to just, talk about Chromaline and some of its cool products, but we want to kind of do a little bit more of a sneak peek behind the curtain of emulsion making and what's involved in putting out the best products that we see on the market today. Marty, you yourself have been in the industry for quite some time now. Can you please introduce yourself and dive a little bit into Chromaline for our users who are not familiar with the brand, which if you're in screen printing would be pretty surprising, but you never know. There are some people.
It does happen. Yeah, sure. Yeah, so I've been in the industry for about 26 years, 17 at Chromaline. I started off as a chemist, actually, and spent about 8 years in the lab developing the ImageMate product line. And the Iconics company purchased the ImageMate product brand. And I came along for the ride and moved over to Chromaline side and have been there since. And in that transition, I went over to sales and taking care of a territory. So today I am, as you mentioned, North American Director of Sales for Chromaline.
What's the story behind Chromaline? How long have they been in the industry? Where did they come? And how did they get into the business?
Yeah, Chromaline started off as a company called ChromaGlow in 1952, and they were actually a screen printer making metallic labels back then. And in the 60s, they patented a product called a direct indirect stencil. And they just evolved the company into providing more as supplies and then started developing products. And in 82, they changed the name to Chromaline. So we've been, just a supplier to the industry ever since.
We actually recently brought on Chromaline this year. I think it's, I don't know, maybe 2-3 months at this point. Don't know exact number of time, but yeah, it's been a great product. Customers really seem to enjoy it. And there was also an acquisition that happened with Sati, correct? So now you guys are part of the Sati group. How has that acquisition helped you guys, in doing what you do? I know you guys operate completely separately, but I'm sure you guys have made some changes into your business. I don't know if you guys rolled in some of your production facilities into Sati or, obviously having a partner like Sati, I'm sure it comes with a lot of benefits as well. And they also have certain products like the Sati laser, which I'm sure now you guys are offering. So I'm sure it's been
So what we've been able to do with that merger of our two companies is Sati continues to operate as they always have as Sati America. And we continue to operate as Chromaline with our existing distribution network. Where we've been able to make the best of both is combining our manufacturing knowledge and processes and scaling of each product into one location. So our efficiencies improve. We have more people thinking about how to make our products better every day. And we have bigger reach now with all of our products. And as you said, we've been able to trade off of what makes our products good, they can incorporate into theirs. What products they have or equipment that they have, we now make available to the Chromaline distribution network.
Another
Awesome.
big thing that's helped with the distribution is the fact that, Chromaline is located up in northern Minnesota. We tease that we can almost see Canada from here. And it's pretty cold up here. And because our products are water-based, they will freeze and get damaged if they're frozen. So now that we're able to manufacture or at least ship things down to South Carolina, we will have less of an issue getting product out to customers during the winter.
Excellent. We were actually chatting about this, Amy, before you joined.
Yeah.
And I was asking Marty if any of the emulsions are, freeze stable. And he kind of said there's, a bit of an asterisk, yes, but Amy will probably say no.
Yep.
We try and offer some promos in late September, usually in October, trying to convince people to place their orders to carry them through the cold seasons. I mean, how important is it to make sure that the emulsions don't get frozen? And if they do, are they usable? Because that's the one question
Right.
everybody asks.
I would say the dual cures, and it depends, they basically have to get frozen solid. I mean, yeah, sometimes they'll be a little cool, but if they do get frozen solid, which we have seen, dual cures have a tendency to kind of crystallize out. They may be able to make a screen, but what we've seen is we call it like a starry night issue, where if you look closely at your stencil, you'll see little flecks and stuff that may make pinholes. In general, what usually happens with a diazo-based or pure photopolymer is that the emulsion will thicken considerably, so it may not be usable.
It's interesting.
Some are a
So,
little more forgiving than others. It all depends on the polymers.
Yeah, and screen
Exactly.
printers, they don't like wasting any money, so they're going to do their best to make it work one way or another.
Right.
Is there any
Sure.
additive that you could add after it has been frozen that may be able to improve the performance, or is it just like give it a shot and see what happens?
Nope.
Nothing. Yeah?
Not when it's
Okay.
polyvinyl alcohol and polyvinyl acetate are the basis of the emulsions, all emulsions. And yeah, once they freeze, they might not come back.
Yeah, it's one of those
Okay,
things
Amy.
that. Go ahead, Shawn.
Yeah, Amy, I'm interested. I like the way you talk and have all this knowledge on emulsion. It's fun. I want to hear a bit more about your story and your background, and maybe you can. I know, like, the emulsion that we have today, maybe we're lucky, but I feel like we have a lot of different variations, and the modern day emulsion that we have is so good. There's so much flexibility of what we have and what we can use.
Mm-hmm.
When did that change, and what was that? What did people have before that was hard, and why did it evolve so much?
Sure. Well, when I first started here, I've been here 35 years ago already. We basically only had like 3 different products, and they were simply diazo-based. And in fact, they were transitioning from to diazo from a bichromate. Bichromates were banned because they are carcinogens and toxic. So people had to move away from that. So the next best thing was the diazo-based. Being here this long, I have, if not developed, I've at least worked on every product we do carry. I don't know how many we're up to now, but it's quite a few, 50 or
Marty
so.
said around 40. It would be his guess.
Yep, that sounds right. So we've slowly, based on the market, based on what our competitors were doing, the biggest probably change after diazo came was the introduction of the SBQ polymers, which were patents that came from Japan. And that gave the benefit to the customer of, the one pot where they didn't have to add the diazo sensitizer. So, that gave you at least a 2-year shelf life versus once you add diazo. Actually, once the diazo comes in contact with water, it immediately starts to degrade. So that's why we guarantee for 1 month for the shelf life of the products. Of course, it'll, work longer, but just to give you the ultimate best stencil, it should only be sensitized a month before being used. So the SBQ came around, and that was easier for the customer. They didn't have to mix and add any diazo. It was extremely fast exposing, maybe 3 times faster than a diazo-based. And it gave them that shelf life that was, 24 months, if not longer. However, it was more expensive. And once we did have a PhD chemist here, and his job solely was to try and come up with alternatives to the SBQ. And at one time, we even made our own salt. Now it was just kind of a dirty, stinky, not very nice process. So kind of once the patent started expiring and everything, we were able to purchase the salt now, but we still make our own resins from the salt. Yeah. And those became very popular, but again, they were mostly just for plastisol inks.
Yeah.
And then that's why we started working with making some more of the hybrids once dual cures came around, where we could add oligomer and monomers, and that really increased the resistance of the emulsion. It made a higher solids emulsion, so you got higher EOM and better image quality. And then we combined that also with the SBQs to kind of give you the best of all worlds.
Very cool. Awesome. And so you've been obviously, I mean, 35 years, that's really impressive with Chromaline, and Chromaline being one of the largest manufacturers of emulsion. You obviously played a pivotal role in the technology we see that's used in North America. I mean, how'd you get into this? Do you come from a chemistry background yourself? Or
Well,
is
I
it just something you
came,
fell
you know,
into?
as I said, Chromaline is located in Duluth, and so I came up to the University of Minnesota Duluth to go to college. I was interested in science, so I majored in biology and chemistry. And then, of course, I met my husband up here, and there are very few jobs up here where you can use a chemistry degree. And I went to interview someplace, and they said, actually, I have a friend that's looking for a chemist. And so I came and interviewed, and 35 years later, I'm still here.
Wow, congrats. That's awesome.
Very cool. And
And
if
we
you look
do,
at, go ahead, Amy.
yes, we make or design the emulsions and everything here, but R&D is also very closely involved with the whole manufacturing process. So, we have to set everything up and write procedures, show manufacturing how to make the emulsions. Of course, at Chromaline, we also coat our own films here. So we spend a lot of time with the production crew monitoring the production of the coated films, all the quality control and everything. We kind of hate to say it, but we kind of do it all here. Even during COVID, we were helping out and not only up in the mix room and making the actual mixes, but we were putting labels on diazo bottles and everything like that. So, and I'm also in charge of our quality control program now too. That, and we are ISO 9001 certified, so I'm also in charge of our ISO systems.
Very cool. Now, one thing I thought of when we talked about the Sati acquisition, and you're talking about how now you guys are sharing ideas, do you guys have separate R&D departments, or do you guys kind of work together now and develop products jointly for each label? What does that look like now for you guys?
We do have the separate departments, but we are working together, kind of share ideas off of each other. We meet, in fact, right now I was supposed to be meeting with their R&D group in our weekly meeting, but yeah, share ideas back and forth. Or one of the biggest things that probably came out of it is, yes, even though we make similar products, the raw materials used to make those products were different. So we, well, we should try this in your product, or, we'll try it in their product. And it also helps that we have a little more buying power now too.
Yeah.
Lot larger capacities, being done down there, and then we can piggyback off of what they purchase.
Sure.
We're talking
for
about
sure.
raw
Makes sense.
materials. We're seeing like in our industry, especially right now, Zack was talking about all the glue and stuff like that. Like the products that we use, there's a lot more regulations that are impacting the development of our products, right? So is there a constant change? Do you guys have to test out new raw materials, chemicals? What is that like? Because I know like there's a few products right now. Zack, I don't know exactly the codes, but like they've been swept off the shelf. Like they're not available anymore in Canada, right?
Yeah, like we've seen like Albichem Spiff, which was a spot remover we used, and like
Yeah, exactly.
our dry web, they've had to change the formula, which some customers don't like as much. It just seems like in the last couple months, I know Sati dropped a bunch of adhesive SKUs, if I'm not mistaken, as well. Marty, I'm sure you guys, I don't know if you've had to make any changes to your product line, but yeah, all of a sudden, all these manufacturers are changing their formulas, they're dropping. and it throws all my customers in a panic. Screen printers are creatures of habit. They're used to using the same, dry web for 15 years. And it's like, oh no, you have to change. I'm like, oh God, I can't do this. Like, I'm going to implode, So the last couple months has been interesting trying to get everyone to try new stuff, right?
Right. Well, everything started with us with COVID because there are a number of raw materials that we receive from overseas and we had trouble getting them, plus places were shut down. So in a way, it was good because it made us have to reach out and find alternative suppliers for our raw materials. Unfortunately, there's a lot of them that are very specific and there are no alternatives. So that's why we kind of had a backlog of trying to fulfill orders and everything. But yeah, now we're coming around. There's still some things we're running into shortages. Big one we're having right now is there's a worldwide pigment shortage. And so it's affecting the paint industry, the inks, everything right now. So we're looking for alternative suppliers for that. And so having to qualify them. And of course, when we have orders out there, it's like, okay, quick, we got to get this in, and everything else is put on the back burner so we can get, mixes made and qualify the new pigments. We've seen a lot of changes now. Most of the regulations for us, we do sell worldwide, so Europe is the one that kind of implements and starts all these changes. So we get, signed up for email updates from all the agencies that regulate different things, and so we have to respond to that. Sometimes we'll get actual requests from customers, or they're saying, hey, I can't have this, can you change your product? So I think we respond fairly quickly and be able to make the changes. Another big thing we're working on right now, of course, everybody's heard of the PFAS. Well, we do use a very tiny amount in some of our products, but we're looking at, eliminating that. Unfortunately, they work awesome, and trying to find something that works just as well is not as easy. So it's been all hands on deck, and Saudi Americas is doing, working on the same projects, and we're sharing information on that to try and locate new raw materials that'll work.
I'm sure once these regulations, go into place, obviously it's frustrating because you might find out that some of your top sellers now need to be modified or changed. How much of a notice do you get when these regulations come into play? Do they basically say, hey, you have 3 months or 6 months or a year to get rid of these products? Like, what does that look like? And then if you're sitting on inventory, that's not moving, that has that, are you guys allowed to sell it, or it's like, oh, time to scrap it? Like, how does that whole cycle look like for you guys?
Yep, that sometimes we are given advance notice. Like, of course, the PFAS, that's been happening worldwide, and I think it's 2025 is the deadline to get rid of products in that. Yeah, as far as the regulations, we do have more time for that. We're trying to use up, inventory, and of course, we're working with South Carolina on that too. But sometimes just replacement of raw materials, we won't find out until we go to place an order. That seems to happen the most to us. You go to place the order and they say, well, I'm sorry, it's not available, or we no longer make it. And then it's a scramble to try and find a replacement. Sometimes we'll say, hey, what do you have to replace with it? Or sometimes you just have to go out and try and find something.
Yeah,
it's not easy.
Sometimes, yeah, it seems like there's a big disconnect there from even your raw material suppliers to you guys, right? I mean, who knows? Maybe they are getting a heads up, or maybe they're not. I mean, but the fact that you guys got to be able to, make a 180 pretty quick, yeah, that could definitely be challenging. So it's just interesting to hear that, because then we get, as district dealers, we kind of get frustrated because it's just like, hey, we can't get this product anymore. Or we've literally had, one example was one of our dry web suppliers. We had like 2,000 cans on order, and then we get a shipment, and I send one to or like different customers. Everyone's getting the new product. And all of a sudden, one customer's like, hey, Zach, what's going on with this? I got defective cans. I'm like, I don't know, just send it back, we'll replace it. And then like 2 days later, someone's like, hey, your product's a little weird. I'm like, oh, that's kind of strange. I hear it 3 times. I'm like, okay, let me reach out to the supplier. And they're, oh yeah, formula revision. And it should be the same. It's like, no, it's definitely not the
No, it's
same. Everyone's
not.
complaining all of a sudden. So
Yeah, it's a whole
yeah,
domino effect. When we get these notices that we have to make changes, it starts in the lab with qualifying alternative materials. And then Amy will go through with the equipment that we have in-house to confirm that making this change is invisible. And then it goes another step where she'll make small batches, give it to the sales team. When we go to key customers, and we have to confirm out in the field that this is either invisible or minimal change that really
Yeah.
shouldn't affect anybody, or make an improvement. So we don't just make a change and don't say anything. There's several steps we have to go through, especially because we are ISO certified.
Yep. We'll start out, like Marty said, with just maybe a half a dozen customers, and then we'll go and make a small batch plant trial, get that out to more customers, and then when we feel confident, then we will make the change. If it doesn't work, then we go back and we redesign and find something else.
yeah.
And how do you
Cool.
develop and test new products before commercializing them? Like, there's so many good products out there on the market that instead of maybe adapting the ones that are there, what's the process of developing something new? Like, what's the research behind it? Like, why? What's the goal? What's the main purpose behind developing a new product, Nick?
It depends. Sometimes it comes directly from a customer. Well, they'll say, hey, we want this improved, or we wish we had that. So we'll respond and just start designing something new, or maybe we'll even have an idea here in-house where we could make a change or improve things. But yeah, most of the time it does come from the sales force or customers.
Yeah. I'm
And
sure they're, Shawn,
what's some of the things that are looking for?
In general, it's usually like current products don't have enough water resistance. That's one of them for like water-based ink. Some of the water-based inks out there now are getting really aggressive, and that's one of the hardest things for us to do is, yeah, it's easy to make something water resistant, but you have to be able to wash it out with water. It has to be
Yeah.
water processable. Those two don't go hand in hand easily. So
They want it
it's,
to be reclaimable.
tweaking to ride the line of you can still wash it out, but it has to be resistant. So, and then of course, price is also a big thing. They always want things that are cheaper. So then that kind of restricts the raw materials you can use too.
yeah, they want them cheaper, but to perform better
Better.
Mhm.
than the right. So that's usually how it
Good,
works.
fast, and cheap, right?
Yeah,
And then
exactly.
it has to work on every type of light source. Like I said, we sell worldwide, so we have people making solar cells and using like 8K metal halides, or we have them over in India using the sun. But it's like one product has to do it all. So that's
Yeah.
another challenge we face.
That's why there's
When you,
50 products now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Exactly.
exactly. When you talk about customers, who are giving recommendations, I mean, no offense, Shawn, but I think if you reach out and ask them, hey, I need a different product, it's not going to be the shop with one or two, three autos. I mean, I'm sure customers like the Nike, Adidas, Fanatics of the world, the Under Armours, these are the customers, I'm assuming, that would generally come to you and say, hey, we have a bigger responsibility to have a greener footprint this year, and we want to, clean up this product. These big, industry gorillas, I mean, how much of an impact do they have on companies like you guys when they say, hey, we want this? And I'm sure they're not just coming to you, they're coming up with, something that they want developed, and they're shopping around to all the big boys. How much impact
sure.
do these large clients have on your guys' business, especially when it comes down to the R&D?
Marty, do you want to take over on that? Because that would come from the sales.
Yeah, I'm thinking of when the ink industry had to do away with phthalates. And that did trickle down to us because we had to make sure we didn't have phthalate in the emulsion that could possibly leach into the ink and then onto the garment. So I think a lot of that does start with the ink companies. They bear the first round of burden for that. And then more so for us, it's government regulations, I would say. The customers are just, as Amy said, they're looking for performance. Maybe it's application specific. Larger accounts who are shifting to different inks, may say, hey, I'm doing 200,000 piece run. I need an emulsion that's going to hold up. Or we're an industrial printer and we're using these exotic solvents that are really aggressive, and we need a stencil that's going to hold up to that.
Makes sense. I mean, I guess it's those large companies that need those requests, because when you're a small shop like us, for example, you're doing a maximum of like, the biggest job we ever done was 197,000 shirts. I mean, the emulsion we had was perfectly fine, didn't break down. I mean, we broke some screens because it got so hot on press at a certain point that screens break, but that's just part of the screens, right? The emulsion was great, but I think those large manufacturers, when they're doing those 300, 400,000 prints, and it's just like small prints on a garment that's not even sewn together, that's when the emulsion starts breaking down. They're asking for better things. But yeah, that's where my question was going from at the beginning. Not that I didn't know where they were coming from, is more like it's not something that we don't see, right? Like that we actually see, because the emulsion for us is working amazing. So it's more something like that. But
the other big thing we've seen a change, of course, within the last few years is people switching to the LED exposure units.
That's what I wanted to, yeah.
The initiators we use for cross-linking the emulsions will work, but they don't cross-link as fully, so then people aren't getting the durability that they need. So that is a project I have been working on, is changing the initiator so that it'll work with the LEDs as well as the typical light sources that people use.
Do you feel like adding a bit of diazo into the dual cure emulsion, or like a photopolymer, like the hybrid, helps with the LED having a better crosslink?
It slows it down a little bit, so that, I mean, it will help crosslink a little bit, but it also helps slow it down so you get your better resolution.
Yeah. That's what we found for us, like the best solution we had to get the same resolution and get screens that are really hard and worked fine with water-based inks or any acrylic ink that we have, was just adding a bit of diazo.
Mm-hmm.
And it helped tremendously in our screens. We didn't have any breakdowns or anything like that when we switched from just a standard LED unit to our LTS. So we had to adjust, and since we adjust, it's been amazing.
Yep. And I usually recommend, so you don't slow it down too much, I usually say, well, they should add like a quart size bottle of diazo to a gallon of emulsion.
And we have a lot of customers that are starting to implement that now.
Yeah.
And it seems to make a big difference. Amy, do you mind just speaking high level on the different types of emulsions on the market and when they're best used? There's dual cure, one part, diazo, hybrid. I think that there's a big lack of education to our end users on the different types of emulsions and when to properly use them. It seems it's confusing. I mean, even as someone who does this for a living doing sales, and you have, Chromaline's got 40 emulsions, Sati's got 50 emulsions, Ulano's got 35 emulsions, and everyone's just like, why are there so many emulsions? Like, that's another big question. Why can there not be like 3 or 4, and then they make the different emulsions and then they come in different colors, right? Because, some customers are convinced. There's some customers that are like, I've been using a pink emulsion for 15 years. I'm not changing because I like that color because I could see pinholes. Or some will say, red, I know you get more detail than blue. So maybe to start, if you can go over the different types of emulsions and then kind of lead into why we have so many, and how does color play a factor in this? Is it literally just for customer preference, or is there performance benefits based on color as well?
Well, when it comes to choosing an emulsion, I always start with, what inks are the customers using? Because that determines what emulsion to use. And of course, then they're also kind of based according to the price. So your diazo-based are your very simple emulsions. And as I mentioned earlier, they're based on polyvinyl alcohol and polyvinyl acetate. And when you're only using a diazo-based crosslinker, you can either use only one type of emulsion for solvent-based inks or one type of emulsion for water-based inks. You have to have a separate emulsion for each. When it comes to having the dual cures, you can use those, depending on the emulsion, you can use them for both water and solvent-based inks. That's, one of the blessings of the dual cures. And of course, everything will work with the plastisol. The SBQ emulsions originally were just based for the plastisol emulsion or inks. And we started adding the dual cure components to the SBQs, and that in turn made those so that you could use them universally with either the water-based or solvent-based inks. Now, when you're talking colors, yes, a lot of it kind of gets me frustrated sometimes when Marty in the sales group will say, hey, I want the customer to test this, but they really like, the blue emulsion and it only comes in purple. So can you make some blue for me? And I'm like, well, why do I have to go make this? Make them test it first and then we'll talk color. No, they want the color. So yes, we will make the individual colors. I don't know how much the typical customer would be able to see it, but yes, the differences in colors can alter exposure time. That's why we basically only use the purple, the reds, and the greens, blues for pigment choices, because other things, like once you start adding yellow, of course, if you try black or anything like that, it starts blocking the UV light and it interferes with your cross-linking.
Marty on that. So I know he's bugging you, but coming from the sales side of things, there's some customers, if I tell them the emulsion's half the price, it's going to perform better, but it's a color that they don't want, and they're stuck on it. You're not changing their mind. It's just, like I said, screen printers are creatures of habit. It's, we sell into everything, embroidery, wide format, laser, everything. And the majority of the, client base in the different sectors of the print, they're more open-minded. They're open to change. They like to see the latest and greatest in technology, especially the digital guys. But screen printers, I've had some guys that are on certain products when I reach out to, Keith Perkins from Sati. He's like, oh, that emulsion's like 30 years old. I'm surprised anyone in the world's still using that. And you try and get them off of it, and the customer's like, no, I'm not ever getting rid of this emulsion, Yeah, I could, I feel your pain, Marty. I know how it is. Definitely hear you there.
And how important is it to match up the right emulsion with the correct light source? I know you touched base on that a bit earlier, but first of all, what is your favorite light source? I know there's many options out there: metal halide, LED, fluorescent. What's the right emulsion for each, and which one's your favorite and why?
Well, we do have, because we have to develop and test things here. So we do have a fluorescent, we have a 5K, we have a 8K. We have an LTS. So we try to get everything to work on it. But of course, if you're using a fluorescent, then you want to stay with more of the pure photopolymers, because if you're trying to use something with diazo, like a straight diazo emulsion, it might take 10 to 12 minutes to do that exposure. I've heard customers even go longer. With the pure photopolymer, like our Chroma Blue, PL, anything like that, you're probably looking more at maybe 1.5 to 3 minutes. Usually don't do a lot of dual cures on the fluorescent units, but of course your better light sources are going to do well with any emulsion. The LTSs, most anything works on that. The pure photopolymers work the best. And like I said, we're fine-tuning the dual cures and everything so that they do work better on the LTS LED units.
Shawn actually has the Sati LTS. He's a big fan of it. I mean, all of my customers really like the idea of laser, but the price point, unfortunately, right now is more than double if you compare like the MNRI image or the Exile wax machine, right? So it's something that everybody wants to jump into, but everyone's especially for the Canadian market, very few opportunities of customers who are willing to go laser, just because even to get them into a water-based or wax is already such a big investment for the Canadian market, right? We just don't have the volume and size of the shops that you see in the US. What's your take on the laser? And maybe I'll direct this one to Marty. Do you like it? Do you think that pricing is going to slowly start getting more aggressive so that it can, get into the industry a lot quicker? Do you see price points starting to come down, or do you think there'll be limitations of the technology where that might just not be possible?
Yeah, when they first came out with the the laser system. My concern was that you could get a thorough through cure. So from the print side to the squeegee side, was there enough power for the laser to penetrate and cure the emulsion thoroughly? And the answer was yes, it does. We've been able to cure even like our fat films, which are 200 microns thick, on a laser. So it can be done. It has the power. You asked the question, can we, will the prices come down? Probably, as most things do.
Yeah.
We've been asked, well, how about just making a single screen version? Because currently our laser systems hold 2 automatic frames. Well, what if we just come out with a single frame one? Will that cut the price in half? No, because all you're doing is making the cabinet shorter.
Bog.
All the other components have to be inside. But as anything, technology will evolve, and I'm sure other methods and parts will come out, and there may be an alternative coming up in the next few years. I don't know one right now, but I've been really impressed with the quality and the speed of output that the laser does. Even if you don't even look at the consumable savings when you leave inkjet and when you leave a computer to screen type system.
I don't know if you guys have seen these. I mean, I don't remember exactly. I didn't spend too much time looking into it, but there seems to be some like newer technologies coming out of China where, you're printing and there's no emulsion, or I think it prints the emulsion or something. Shawn, I don't know if you've seen those, or Marty, are you familiar with that technology? Do you think that's going anywhere? Does it have legs?
We're looking at it, because if you're not looking at it, then you're going to be behind. It could be the next generation of creating a stencil. It's still a little too early to say it will be or won't be. But it's an interesting concept that's not necessarily new, because there are 3D printers. There are printers that will deposit on any horizontal or a vertical surface. So it's an interesting concept that we're interested in. It's one of those to be.
Yeah, and sorry, again, I don't know exactly how the technology works. Are they printing without emulsion, or is it printing emulsion? What exactly is that technology doing?
It's actually depositing 100% UV ink, essentially is what it is. So the questions that we have are, well, once it is deposited onto the mesh, is that screen reclaimable? We don't know yet. How durable is it for printing anything outside of plastisol ink? We don't know yet. So there's a lot of questions still to be answered.
Yeah, I mean, there's been solutions out for a long time. I know there's like a red Japanese machine, I'm sure you guys always see at the trade show. And, you don't use any emulsion, you print directly on it. It's not really good for large runs. And then you kind of chuck the screen and the mesh, and then you have to remesh it. And, some customers are like, oh, that's cool because I don't need a washout booth. I don't need any chemicals. I don't need any emulsion. But then there's the cost of stretching, chucking the mesh every single time is not really feasible. So again, even from the labor perspective, it's like, yeah, you don't have to clean the screen anymore, but now you have to, stretch the screen, and is there really a savings there? So that technology's been around a long time. But yeah, I think if there's a way to print obviously without using emulsion, then that would be pretty cool. Maybe not for emulsion suppliers. So I'm sure that's why you guys are looking at it and trying to get ahead of the ball. But yeah, I think it needs to be able to reclaim, for me at least, to have legs. Unless you're a little garage shop, you don't want to be chucking your mesh all the time, right? Cost is just way too high.
Yep, as with anything, there's trade-offs, and it's either price or performance or something in between.
Yeah. I think what we have right now in the industry, and like I was saying earlier, is like we're really lucky to be in a state where we are right now, where we have really good products, and the technology is evolving so much that just having a tri-lock system with LTS or CTS machine is game changer for your shop. I mean, especially if you have multiple autos. I mean, getting a job on press and keeping a job running and making more money is so much better than what it was before, right? Just because of that technology that we have. And now the emulsion is not breaking down. Your mesh is just better than what it was. Your screens are better. They're not warping. You don't need to have those pneumatic roller frames. You can just buy frames stretching on your own, or just buy static frames that are really, really good. So I think it's all those combinations that put us in a place where we're really lucky to have those machines, this equipment. And when you look at technology like that, there's this question that pops up in my mind is like, all right, well, You get all the reclaim aspect of it. You also get the OM. How am I going to be able to control the OM on my mesh depending on what ink I'm going to use or what I'm going to print on? Like there's a lot of variables. What's the tri-lock system going to look on those machines, right? It's all things like that you have to think about as well. And adapting a new technology in an industry that, like Zack was saying, we're all dinosaurs, right? We like what we have, and I think it's going to be something that's not going to be there in the next few years. It's going to take time, but that's my opinion.
Yeah. I mean, Marty, I was at a shop yesterday. You know, they've been screen printing for 40 years. They're doing some crazy stuff. I mean, they have, you know, fluorescence, no dark room. They have a cabinet. They pop in the coated screen in there, which they're coating one-on-one with the sharp side. They have zero stencil, and then they put it in a cabinet that has fans blowing air everywhere, which is dust particles, and then they take it out 2 hours after coating it, so obviously it's not properly cured, and then they're taping off the entire screen on both sides except for the image. You know, and you know, I go in there and I'm like, hey man, you got some serious problems. And they're like, well, I've been doing this for 40 years. Like, it works. I've been printing t-shirts for 40 years. You know, you just see crazy stuff happening in shops, and some shops are receptive when I go in there and I offer recommendations. And then some are like, Zack, I've been screen printing longer than you're alive. Thank you very much, but you have nothing to teach me, you know? And I think, again, a lot of this comes down to education, because that shop that started 40 years ago, at that time, there was no internet, there's no social media, there's no school of screen printing, you know? So he's learning from a guy that he worked in a shop who learned from another guy, you know? And the funny thing is, you look at the, you know, technical data sheets or the instructions, they're usually there. It'll tell you what you need to be successful with the emulsion. Nobody reads that. You know what I mean? So Marty and then Amy, if you can you list some of the most important things that you would recommend for a shop to be successful in making a proper screen? So
I love this.
High level, some of your top, you know, things that you see, most common mistakes and easy ways to fix them.
Okay. I would say the key word is consistency. Shawn, you're nodding your head because you know this. It's when you can control the variables, and Shawn, you said the key word variables. If you can control your variables and create a process that is consistent day in and day out, you will create a consistent output. So you know what you're going to expect when you print that shirt, if you control everything in between the design and the print. So to me, it's all about consistency. In the shops that I see that are most successful have an operating procedure, and their employees know these are the steps I take. And if something's out of whack, I don't change the process. I figure out what's happening that's causing the problem and fix it.
Yeah, and that's why you look at, you know, talk consistency, you look at things like autocoders, right? I mean,
Exactly.
You have someone who's, you know, coding, like yesterday at the shop, they had a little bucket, and there's a guy who's coding 100 and, you know, something screens per day. And you know that the first 10 screens are going to be different than the next 20, then the next 30, then the day after, or on a Monday, if he went out Sunday and he's hungover, he's, you know, it's just like all these variables that come into play, or a different employee. Yeah, I mean, consistency is definitely key, I think, is creating repeatable outcomes, because everything is based on, you know, the first time that you tested it. I mean, even for example, that, you know, using an exposure calculator, you go into like 90% of shops, they have no idea what you're talking about if you ask them they have one, you know, and it's like it's under a $50 investment, and it's going to help you dial in, you know, your exposure unit to your environment, to your light source, to the emulsion. But nobody does. Everyone just guesses. They're like, oh yeah, I've been doing 5 minutes like this forever. And then it's like, well, the winter's drier, the summer's more humid, you know, like you can't just guess. Like, this is science.
Mhm.
I guess screen printers don't like science. They want to operate on hearsay, you know, and or maybe they ask it, like when a customer asks me and they say, hey Zack, cool, I'm gonna try this chroma blue. How long do I expose for? I'm like, I can't tell you that. I don't feel comfortable. Like, buy an exposure calculator, or if you're sampling the Chromaline, I'll throw in the exposure calculator because I want to set you up for success. You know what I mean? And I think it's just something that a lot of shops unfortunately ignore, and they pay for it, Amy, what about you? What are some top recommendations you would have for screen
I would
printers?
say the top thing is making sure your stencils are dry, having a good, if they have a drying cabinet, to dry it well. Because that is one big thing that does affect exposure is the moisture that's in your screen. It's kind of, you see things two different ways. Anything that has diazo in it, that water interferes with the cross-linking. So in the summer, you usually have to increase your exposure time and decrease it a little bit in the wintertime. The opposite is true of a pure photopolymer like a chroma blue. If there's high humidity, it's going to actually become faster exposing. So then in the summer, you have to decrease your exposure time. So I would say the top three are probably making sure you have a dry screen, making sure your exposure unit, your light is, not aging. So you make sure you're getting your proper exposure, and then eliminating as much dirt and dust as possible is critical. And yeah, I would say that's my number one tech calls I usually get is, hey, what's my exposure time? How long should I expose for? And of course, I usually walk them through. I used to have to walk them through the whole process of doing a step exposure, making 6 different exposures on your one screen. And now I can just say, hey, why don't you go to our website and we have videos that'll walk you through how to do this.
Nick
So
Moore,
peace.
who's been with Chromaline, maybe 50 years, Amy,
Mm-hmm.
he has the universal answer for the question, how long do I expose my screen? And that answer is as long as it takes.
Yeah. And
Like that.
and from what I've seen, just traveling to shops and using the exposure calculator, I'm not over exaggerating when I say maybe 95% of shops are underexposed. Like, I don't think that I'm over exaggerating at all. We had doing some visits in Montreal, and they visited like 18 shops or something like that, and there wasn't one that had the proper exposure time. Like, if you're using the 21 step, you're trying to hit the 7. There's shops that are like 3 and 5. It's not even close.
And the similar answer is 90% of the troubleshooting we do is exposure related. People are underexposing, and it causes such a downwind effect of, it breaks down our press, pinholes, harder reclaim. So many things affect just that little bit of time. If you do it right at the beginning, you can improve your process whole way downstream.
Yeah,
I think
even on reclaim, it gets nasty. Like guys that have, the M&R Ecotexes and that kind of stuff, it starts causing so much problem because you have all that gunk, that's just falling off the screen. One other thing too that I want to pick your brain on, because, again, 95% of screen printers don't want to do it. How important do you feel that using a degreaser, how important is that? Obviously on a new screen, you want to do it. Just because, it might be oils from someone that touched the mesh at the factory or something like that. So, new screens, I could usually convince them that, hey, you got to do it. But when you're reclaiming a screen, how important do you feel it is to actually use a degreaser? And what benefits will the degreaser have with the emulsion?
Marty, you want this or? Okay.
I'm mixed because it really depends on how well the screen comes out of your reclaim area and the chemistries that are used there. Because there are some ink degraders that do a phenomenal job of degreasing. And stencil removers get out the rest of your stencil. So after that, it's one of those it depends answers, because we could coat screens, that same screen with a low quality emulsion, and we could see fish eyes all over the screen. But if you have a good quality emulsion, they tend to cover up some of those blemishes far better. And you could get away with degreasing. Now, I'm not saying get away from degreasing, because if you've got it in your process, continue to do that. But one of the big benefits to degreasing is the consistency of the coating, but also the adhesion of the emulsion to the mesh is improved. And by doing that, you actually get better resolution because the finer details are going to stay in place.
I think it goes back to consistency, right? It's for me, like there's like you were saying, depends on the job. If you're doing a simulated process job, you probably want to screen prep and degrease your screens. You want to make sure that your exposure is perfect. But everybody that's doing a vector artwork, you can use pretty much any emulsion. If you're printing with Plastisol, you don't really care about the decreasing. You don't really care about the EOM. You can like, there's so many variables that you can put into printing just a standard vector artwork on a shirt. But for me, it's simply consistency and SOP that we put in place with our team. And I think like we've been saying consistency and working on things like that. And there's probably a lot of people that are listening to this and they're like, yeah, well, you have a dual coder machine, automatic coder, you have LTS machine, you have all these things. And I agree. That's what makes our shop the way it is now. And it's so consistent. It's easy to work, right? But there was a lot of long hours and hard hours worked into making sure that our process worked correctly. I didn't have two people coding our screens. I was the one coding our screens, right? Because I wanted the same consistency. And I was held bound on having really good quality. That's what I wanted to output. So if you're listening to this podcast and you're a shop that doesn't have the automatic machines to be able to be consistent, I think having consistency with you doing the darkroom stuff and being able to delegate other things. I think being able to have a press operator that's going to print instead of taking care of the darkroom is far much easier to do than somebody that's going to take your darkroom. It's called screen printing for a reason. You start with a screen, right? So if you're doing that, I think you should take care of cells and you should take care of your darkroom because you're going to have consistent quality because you're going to do it. And you're going to be able to evaluate things. You're going to be able to test exposure calculators. You're going to be able, because it's your business. You're going to love those things, right? You're going to want to make and figure out the best way to make best screens and how to do it and how to learn it. So I think that's where you're going to be able to then go into get automated machines. But I mean, I'm getting on a rant because I'm passionate about this, right? That's how I was able to buy those machines and get where we are today is because I was so picky about things, but I didn't want to delegate those things that I thought would make us not evolve into better printers. I wanted to keep those and delegate everything else that I thought didn't affect the quality that we output. Having somebody receiving the garments and counting them and QCing at the end of the oven, I can delegate that for sure. But going into the darkroom, delegating that, I think it's not something you should start with. Exactly the same thing as cells, right? Because you know your business. But that's just me saying my 2 cents because it's easy for me nowadays to say it's consistent. We have all the machines. There's still SOPs. There's still stuff that we have to do every single morning to keep the same quality. But there was a process that we went through to get there. I think, like Marty said, and hit the nail on the head is consistency. And that starts with having one person do something and then you can evolve with that. But yeah.
So Marty and Amy, I mean, a lot of this has been very educational and obviously giving a lot of feedback, but we obviously want to give you guys a little bit of a spotlight because we want to help you sell some of your product. Marty, are there a couple, favorite products of yours that you think every screen printer should give a shot from the Chromaline line? Some superstars. I mean, obviously there's tons, but I'm sure there's a couple products you guys have really made your name on that, most shops should give it a shot.
Okay. I would say, as Shawn, spinning off of what you were saying about, let's take the new shop, the guys who are just trying to get into it. One of the variables you can remove from this is coding emulsions by hand. Worry about other stuff first. We have a product called a capillary film that's cut in sheets. You can apply it very easily. It will give you a consistent stencil every day because it's the same thickness, because it's coming from us as a sheeted film. Start there. Start with the sheets. And yes, they do cost a couple bucks a sheet versus, a quarter or 50 cents for a screen of emulsion. But you don't have to worry about it day in and day out. So I recommend new people coming in to start with the capillary film for their stencils. And if we can tout our product, ours is called Quick Film, but there are others out there that do the same job. And then for those who are in that mid-range and bulk of our users, our Chroma Blue has been by far our biggest seller in volume sales. It's just one of those forgiving products that coats mesh very easily. When we talk about being able to coat over blemishes or stuff that's left in the mesh, it coats it over very well. We've done studies of the value of it because of the solid content, there's less water. You can coat it 1-in-1 and you have a fantastic stencil thickness to print almost anything. So you can get more screens per gallon. And then the newcomer, being Chromaline, is higher humidity resistance. So if you're in areas like Florida where your inkjet films are sticking to your stencils, I recommend Chromaline because it is our latest generation of SPQs that's still fast, very easy to see through, but it resists that stickiness you get when you take it out of an exposure system. And then for the water-based users, our Hydra X, which is our latest development hybrid SPQ, does a phenomenal job resisting all these varying water-based inks. It's fast to expose, and it is, as Amy said, she's designed it to cure extremely well with the 405 nanometer, which is the LED exposure units today. So you could use that for any ink, really, in most textile shops, water or plastisol. So that Hydra X has been an up and comer for us.
I think you're missing one product, your TexTac palette adhesive. I know it's not a big deal. It's just a water-based glue, but literally, it's funny because pretty much every product you mentioned, we brought in RB Digital, and the TexTac was the first product that I had emailed them about because I'm like, I need this. Like, we have some other products that are okay. They just don't work as good. Theirs is super affordable, does a great job. I wish more customers used it. Unfortunately, most customers still like using premium flash adhesive and gunking up the floors and the presses and their lungs. But that TexTac, that's a really good product if you're using spreadable. It's really, really good. Actually, Marty, I was going to pick your brain on something, and I don't know if it's an Amy question. I think we touched on it once, Marty, but it was a while back, and I got another inquiry about it. The TexTac can be used just as spreadable, right? But it can also be cut to be in a spray bottle. How good does it perform in those? I don't know if you've seen like the Albatross spray gun systems that you connect to the air. Would that need to kind of be diluted a certain percentage to be successful in that product or in that piece of equipment? And is there any maintenance that you would recommend if you are using it?
Yeah, usually we have people cut it about 10% with water just to loosen it up a little bit so it goes better through those spray systems. The two downsides to spraying any adhesive is you're going to get overspray. So unless you have some method of isolating it just to your palette, that's great. And then it's maintenance of the equipment because it will dry at the nozzle tip. So you can get a little gummer on the tip that you have to knock off or clean up, and I would just do a monthly flush of the system with fresh water just to make sure it stays in good working condition.
Yeah, that's what I said a week, which is probably overkill. Like weekly on Friday. If you're not going to be using it on the weekend, just spray the excess glue in and kind of fill it up. Okay, so cut it down 10%. And Shawn, you know the nozzle tip. You know that the Firebird cleaning solution for like the Schultz nozzle tips. Like that's probably perfect. Just drop it in there at the end of the night. And
for sure
that'll probably make sure it doesn't get gummy at all, or even run that solution through a system because DTG pre-treat is basically a glue of some sort, right? Salts and that kind of stuff. That's what it is. So. Cool. Okay. Well, awesome.
That's been fun.
Yeah, it has been fun. Marty, Amy, I don't know if you guys are allowed to touch on this, but are there any, new and exciting projects that Chromaline is kind of working on that you can allude to, or is everything top secret Area 51 and nothing can leave your lips? We always try, sometimes they say, oh yeah, we have something coming at Printing United, or yes, you'll see it, but yeah.
No, but you can tell us. You can tell us. I'll just edit it out.
Yeah. Okay.
Maybe it's the printable, the machine that prints the emulsion. Maybe that's it. So we'll see.
Maybe that's what it is.
Yeah, you guys will be at Printing United, obviously.
We will be there. Yep, we have a booth. So we always enjoy. Of course, it's Vegas, so how can you not enjoy some time there? But it's always great to see our distributors and customers and talk shop with everyone and see what else is going on in the industry.
Awesome.
Be
Yeah,
fun.
definitely. Well, thank you very much, guys, for your time. I know I'll be seeing you guys in Vegas. Shawn, are you coming this year? Have you decided
Yeah.
yet? Or
I'll be there.
Okay, so Shawn will be there too, and we'll look forward to come meet you guys in person, and maybe we'll meet each other at the poker table. Who knows? Take care, guys.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Thank
Have a good one.
Thanks for having us.